The sun blazed overhead, casting long shadows across the quiet suburban street where Amara Johnson lived with his 10-year-old daughter Princess. The neighborhood was simple. Neatly trimmed lawns, white picket fences, polite smiles, and conversations that never went too deep. Amara often wondered about that, especially as he watched Princess play outside. She was everything to him. After her mother walked away years ago, Princess had become his reason to keep going. That morning was like any other. Princess sat at the kitchen table, focused on her drawing while Amara prepared breakfast. She was sketching a picture of the two of them, father and daughter holding hands under a tree. "Make sure you get my muscles right," Amara teased, playfully flexing as he placed her plate in front of her. Princess giggled and raised the half-finished drawing. "You're the strongest dad in the world," she said, grinning wide. He leaned in and kissed the top of her head. "Don't you forget it." That would be the last time he'd hear her laugh. Later that afternoon, the playground buzzed with kids. Princess had begged to go, and Amara had reluctantly agreed, planning to catch up on paperwork from the auto shop. But he couldn't focus. His eyes kept drifting toward the clock, his mind unsettled. When the phone finally rang, he already knew. The voice on the other end confirmed it. It was a police officer. "Sir, you need to come to Memorial Hospital. It's about your daughter." The drive was a blur. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet sorrow. When the doctor emerged, her words shattered him. "We did everything we could. Princess is gone. They said she'd fallen from the jungle gym, hit her head, a tragic accident, nothing more." But Amara couldn't accept it. The funeral was arranged hastily. Too hastily. Friends came, neighbors spoke softly, but their words passed through him like wind. He couldn't feel anything but emptiness. The small white coffin, trimmed in gold, sat like an odd piece among the rows of gray headstones. At the wake, the unease deepened. Princess's body lay still, her face pale and calm, as if asleep, but something gnawed at him. There were marks on her arms and legs, dark patches that hadn't been mentioned in the autopsy. He remembered how the paramedics looked away when he asked questions, how their answers felt rehearsed. At first, he thought grief was distorting his thoughts, but the feeling didn't go away. The funeral home workers only made it worse. He overheard them in the hall, laughing quietly, speaking about finishing things quickly and not wasting time on people like them. The phrase stung. He knew what it meant. Black families weren't expected to push back, to question, to demand truth. As he leaned over the coffin one final time, something caught his eye. Her hands. Small, gentle. Yet beneath her fingernails was dirt. He froze. Panic swelled in his chest. Turning to his sister Clara, who had flown in from Atlanta, he whispered, voice barely steady, "She didn't have this dirt before? Why would there be dirt under her nails?" Clara glanced nervously at the funeral workers, then looked back at Amara. "You're exhausted," she whispered gently. "You've been through so much. Maybe it's time to let her go." But Amara couldn't. That night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every moment replaying in his mind, the bruises, the dirt, the unsettling laughter of the funeral workers. None of it sat right, and the more he tried to dismiss it, the stronger the unease grew. By dawn, he had made a decision. He drove to an electronics store, purchased a small hidden camera, and returned home without speaking a word. The cashier gave him a curious look but didn't ask questions. At home, Amara quietly removed the coffin's lining, carefully placing the camera inside and adjusting it to capture everything. The act felt disturbing, like a betrayal of peace, but something deep inside refused to accept what he had been told. Later, when Clara stopped by, he told her what he had done. Her reaction was instant. "You're serious?" Her voice was raised in disbelief. "You put a camera in her coffin?" "I had to," Amara said firmly. "You're spiraling," she insisted, worry etched into her face. "What if I'm not?" he countered. "What if something happened and nobody bothered to look because of who we are? What if they just didn't care?" Clara's expression softened, her concern still visible. "And if you're wrong? Then I'll live with it," he said quietly. "But I have to know I tried." That night, he sat in front of his computer, the live feed from the hidden camera playing on the screen. Nothing but darkness, just the quiet, still interior of the coffin. Hours passed. He tried to convince himself he was imagining things, that he was letting grief cloud his mind. Maybe it really had just been a terrible accident. Then, just after midnight, something shifted. A faint movement flickered across the screen. At first, he thought it was a glitch. He leaned in, heart racing. There it was again, a shadow passing across the frame, followed by a soft scraping sound. His chest tightened. Frozen, Amara stared at the footage, eyes wide. It had to be a malfunction. Cameras did that sometimes. Poor lighting, bad connection, strange reflections. But the sound continued, faint and irregular, yet too clear to be dismissed. He rewound the video, hands trembling. Breath fogging the monitor, he watched the moment again. No mistake. There was movement. A subtle shift, like fabric stirring. And then that scraping sound returned. Not constant, not rhythmic, but deliberate. His mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe faulty wiring from the cemetery? An animal? But none of it made sense. This was inside the coffin. Princess's coffin. He rubbed his temples, memories flooding back. The rushed funeral, the unexplained bruises, the dirt under her nails. All those details he'd tried to ignore were now pieces of something darker. Unable to stop himself, he hit play again. This time with headphones on, volume turned all the way up. And that's when he heard the voices. Low at first, like murmurs coming from another room. Then a faint burst of laughter. He paused, listening again, straining to understand. The words came through, quiet but chilling. Quick. They won't even notice. He froze. Rewound. Played it again. This time, he focused only on the background noise. The voices grew clearer. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Just get it done. What's the point? They'll never check. Men. Calm. Indifferent. The words, the tone. It was all too casual. And unmistakably about Princess. Amara jumped from his chair, panic spreading like fire. He paced the room, mind racing, trying to process what he had just heard. It couldn't be real. But the more he thought about it, the more certain he became. Someone had tampered with her body. He ran back to the computer and quickly copied the footage to 3 separate flash drives. Then uploaded it to the cloud and emailed it to himself. He couldn't risk losing it. His first instinct was to call the police, but he stopped himself. What could he possibly say? That he'd installed a hidden camera in his daughter's coffin because he didn't trust the authorities? That he'd heard whispers and seen shadows? They'd dismiss him. Just a grieving father looking for answers in his own sorrow. He needed more. The next morning, Amara returned to the funeral home. The director, an older white man with a rigid demeanor, met him in his dim office. "Mr. Johnson," the man said, folding his hands neatly on the desk. "I'm very sorry for your loss. What can we do for you today?" Amara tried to stay calm. "I have questions about my daughter's body. There were some things that don't make sense." The director's expression didn't shift. "Such as?" "There were bruises that weren't in the report," Amara said steadily. "And dirt under her fingernails. Can you explain that?" The man leaned back, unfazed. "Bodies go through changes after death. Bruising happens. Sometimes residue gets trapped during preparation. It's not unusual." Amara clenched his fists. "That's not a real answer." The man's voice cooled. "I understand your grief, Mr. Johnson. But please respect the professionalism of our staff. If you'd like to file a formal complaint." Amara didn't wait to hear the rest. He turned and walked out, fury bubbling under his skin. The way the director brushed him off only fueled his suspicion. Later that day, he called Clara and asked her to come over. She arrived within the hour, her face drawn with concern. "You're scaring me," she said softly. Clara sat down slowly, her eyes already filled with concern. "Amara," she began, but he didn't wait. He played the video for her in silence. When it ended, Clara's hands trembled in her lap. "This is insane," she whispered. "What are we even supposed to do with something like this?" "We take it to the police," Amara said without hesitation. "We show them everything and demand they reopen the case." Clara hesitated, her voice low. "And if they don't believe us? Then we keep pushing until someone does." That evening, they drove to the station. Amara brought one of the flash drives and explained the situation to the officer at the front desk. The man listened, brows knitted, but agreed to pass it along. 30 minutes later, the detective assigned to the original case stepped out. His face was unreadable as he handed the flash drive back. "This doesn't prove anything," he said flatly. "The audio is unclear. The shadows could be from shifting light or interference. I'm sorry, but there's nothing here that justifies reopening the investigation." Amara's breath caught. "You didn't even watch all of it." "We heard enough," the detective replied, his tone firm. "I suggest you spend your time grieving instead of chasing conspiracy theories." Amara walked out in stunned silence, fury rising with every step. Clara tried to comfort him, but her words barely registered. If the authorities wouldn't help, he would find the truth on his own. That night, he sat in the dark, the footage looping endlessly. The voices echoed in his mind, cold, careless. "They'll never check. Just get it done." He couldn't stop hearing them, couldn't forget her smile or the sound of her laugh. He had made a promise to protect her, and now, more than ever, he intended to keep it. He didn't sleep. The glow of the screen lit up his face, eyes locked on every frame, straining for anything he might have missed. The same sentences haunted him, playing over and over like a curse. His grief turned to fire, burning away any doubt. By morning, he had a plan. He called Clara and asked her to come by. As soon as she walked in, he began pacing, words spilling fast. "They're not going to help. The police already made up their minds. So we're going to find someone who'll actually listen." Clara watched him, uncertain. "Who, Amara? Everyone thinks this is just you not being able to let go." He stopped, stared at the floor, then looked up. "The media. We take this public. If they won't listen privately, we force them to act publicly." Clara looked uneasy. "Are you sure about this? Once it's out there, there's no going back. People could twist it. You might get attacked for even trying." "I don't care," Amara said. His voice cracked, but his eyes were steady. "If they let her die, if they covered it up, then they don't get to hide behind silence." She nodded slowly. "All right. Let's do it." Later that afternoon, Amara sent messages to every local reporter he could find. Hours passed without a response. His frustration deepened until finally, a young journalist named Julia Reyes returned his call. "I saw your message," she said. "And I watched the footage. There's definitely something off about it." Amara's grip tightened on the phone. "But this won't be easy," Julia continued. "Funeral homes don't open coffins after burial without serious cause or legal orders." "They didn't have permission to do what they already did," Amara replied quickly. "Then we need more," she said. "Meet me tomorrow. Bring everything." For the first time since Princess's death, Amara felt something close to hope. The next day, he and Clara met Julia at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. She was younger than he expected, but sharp and composed. "I want to help," she told them, notebook already in hand. "But to run this story, we need more than just a suspicious video. We need real evidence, negligence, a motive, something solid." Over the following days, Julia began piecing everything together. She researched the funeral home and uncovered past complaints, mishandled remains, falsified paperwork, and shortcuts that had been swept under the rug. Amara wasn't surprised, but it still made his blood run cold. He and Clara started tracking down former employees. After several rejections, one agreed to meet. His name was Kevin Foster, a man in his 40s who had left the funeral home under vague circumstances. They met him in a dimly lit diner. Kevin looked anxious, glancing over his shoulder constantly. "I don't know what you want me to say," he muttered, fidgeting with his coffee. "The truth," Amara said, leaning forward. "My daughter's body was tampered with. I just want to understand why." Kevin's hands shook. "You think you're the first?" Amara froze. "What do you mean?" "They've been doing this for years," Kevin said. "Cutting corners. Covering things up. Sometimes it's just bad embalming. Other times it's worse." Clara leaned in. "Worse how?" He hesitated, voice dropping. "They reuse caskets. Swap out bodies to save money. Sometimes the remains get damaged and they scramble to fix it. If your daughter's body was moved, it was to hide something." Amara's stomach twisted. He wanted to scream, but kept his voice steady. Will you go on the record? Julia broke the silence. Your story could change everything. Kevin shook his head. I can't. They already came after me once. I lost everything. They came after me too, Amara said quietly. They trashed my car. Left threats. I'm not stopping. Kevin stared at him, then exhaled. I'll think about it, he said before hurrying out. Amara didn't know if they'd hear from him again, but it didn't matter. He wasn't done. In the days that followed, Julia dug even deeper. She found documentation proving Princess's embalming was rushed, the records altered afterward to hide it. The inconsistencies weren't minor. They were deliberate. Finally, the first article went live. It detailed Amara's experience, the hidden camera, the history of the funeral home. The story caught fire. People from all over came forward, sharing stories of neglect, racism, and silence. But with exposure came danger. One night, Amara awoke to find graffiti sprayed across his garage. Stop digging. His phone rang constantly. Unknown numbers, some leaving threats. Clara begged him to walk away, but Amara refused. They're scared, he said. That means we're close. The mounting public pressure forced the police to act. At last, they reopened the investigation. Amara watched, heart pounding, as the machinery of justice finally began to move. Things progressed slowly, but Julia uncovered a deeper link. One of the funeral home's co-owners had financial connections to nearby hospitals, raising troubling questions about referrals and profit sharing. The web was larger than they'd thought. As pieces continued falling into place, Amara knew this wasn't over. One evening, while reviewing documents with Clara, his phone rang. It was Kevin. His voice trembled. They're coming after me. I need protection. I'll testify, but you have to help me. Amara's chest tightened. He agreed to meet Kevin the next day, though a sinking feeling told him the danger was just beginning. He glanced over at Princess's unfinished drawing, the one she'd left on the table the day she died. His resolve hardened. He wouldn't fail her now. Amara barely slept the night before the hearing. Surrounded by piles of documents, recordings, and handwritten notes, he sat in silence as the hours crept by. The clock ticked unnoticed. Thoughts raced, about Princess, the funeral home, and how far they had come. The anonymous threats still hadn't stopped. One caller had hissed, "You'll regret this." Amara had simply ended the call and set his phone to record the next ones. Fear no longer held power over him. Only the truth did. Kevin Foster, the former funeral home employee, had finally agreed to testify. The decision came at a cost. He'd lost his job, feared retaliation, and turned down Amara's offer of shelter, opting instead to stay with a cousin out of town. Just keep pushing, Kevin had told him. Don't let them bury this. That phrase clung to Amara, echoing in his thoughts. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse steps were packed. Protesters held signs reading justice for Princess and no more neglect. Reporters crowded the entrance. Clara gripped his arm as they approached. Are you ready? She asked. He nodded, though every step felt heavier than the last. No one could truly be ready for this. Inside, tension filled the courtroom. The funeral home's attorneys sat stiffly, dressed sharply, flanked by assistants. Across from them, Amara sat beside Angela Reed, his attorney, a firm, focused woman recommended by Julia. She leaned over. Stay composed, no matter what they say. The opening arguments were relentless. The opposing lawyers portrayed Amara as a father blinded by grief, his judgment clouded by paranoia. They dismissed the camera footage as distorted and inadmissible, claiming the voices were too faint to verify and that shadows could easily be tricks of lighting. Angela countered with the facts: Princess's unexplained bruises, the dirt under her nails, and a long history of complaints against the funeral home. Then she played the footage. The courtroom went quiet. The recorded whispers echoed clearly. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Just get it done. They'll never check. Amara studied the jury as the audio filled the room. Some flinched. Others looked away. A few stared forward, their expressions darkening. Then Kevin took the stand. At first, Kevin's voice was unsteady, his fingers fidgeting. But as he spoke, he found his rhythm. He described in detail the mishandling of bodies, the reuse of caskets, and the pressure to cover up mistakes. They told us no one would notice, Kevin said quietly, motioning toward Amara. Especially not families like his. Silence fell. The words lingered in the air like a heavy fog. The defense tried to discredit him, referencing his dismissal and accusing him of resentment. But Kevin didn't waver. He answered every question calmly, refusing to back down. When the closing arguments ended, Amara felt completely drained. Outside the courtroom, he stepped out for air. Clara joined him. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "you fought for her." His voice cracked as he answered, "It's not enough. Not yet." 3 days later, the courtroom was full as the jury returned. Amara held his breath. The foreperson stood. Guilty. A wave of relief surged through him, but it didn't last. The funeral home was ordered to pay damages, and several employees, including the director, were indicted. But the verdict couldn't bring Princess back. After sentencing, Amara visited her grave. The cemetery felt quieter somehow, lighter. He knelt by the headstone and traced her name with his fingertips. "I did it, baby," he whispered. "They finally saw you." Behind him, Clara stood silently, giving him space. When he rose, she slipped her hand into his. "They can't hurt anyone else now," she said. Amara nodded, the ache in his chest still lingering. In the following weeks, he shifted his grief into purpose. With Clara's support, he launched the Princess Johnson Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to fighting racial discrimination and negligence in healthcare and funeral services. Julia kept the spotlight on their story, using her platform to demand change and accountability. Though the threats eventually stopped, Amara never forgot the fear of those sleepless nights. He kept the tiny camera, the one that started it all, as a reminder of the battle they fought and the daughter he lost. One afternoon, while organizing Princess's room, he found her unfinished drawing, the two of them standing under a tree. He framed it and hung it in the living room. Below the figures, she had written, "Always together, Dad." As Amara stepped back to admire the picture, tears welled in his eyes. This time, they weren't only from sorrow, they were filled with love, with healing, and with a promise kept. He walked outside into the fading sunlight. For the first time in what felt like forever, he could breathe. Princess was gone, but her spirit lived on, in the justice won, the change sparked, and the family still fighting. And Amara was ready to stand with them. If this story touched you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to African Tales by Rosa for more true and powerful stories like this one. Thank you for watching.